Hey guys, so I wanted to make a ranking, right, about what I think are the best characters in this game. Because I've been loitering around, and a lot of people tend to ask who the best character is, and you get a variety of answers, and like I'm gonna say I disagree with a lot of them. And I've also spent time checking out a few tier lists that other people have made. And a lot of times they just say this character is good, look at the things they can make. And to me, it seems like they don't take into account what is valued in this game, and like they don't explain what the thought process is in ranking the characters as high as they usually do. And for that reason, I wanted to put together a don't starve tier list. So, real quick, let's get a few things. Let's establish a few things. I am typically someone that plays towards late game and like mid game, you know, things of that nature. Early game isn't necessarily something that I value, and I don't think it is terribly valuable in this game, since you only really stay in early game for like a really short amount of time. You drop into the game and you already basically have access to end game things if you just rush the ruins. And for that reason, along with the fact that you just spend more time in late game than not because of how this game is structured, I'm going to be valuing late game a lot. This is how characters currently stand, so, you know, if, like, let's say WX, Wickerbottom, Wilson, and Maxwell, like, if they get any major reworks, like any major rework changes, then, maybe I'll update it, you know, maybe I won't. If it's drastic enough that I feel that I need to talk about it, then I'll mention it. But, yeah, I'm gonna try breaking down who I think the best characters are, and I'm gonna kind of justify why I think that is, for, you know, obvious reasons. Ultimately, though, this is just my opinion, right? I'm going to try to explain my thought process as best I can, so it doesn't seem like I'm just ragging on characters for the sake of ragging on characters. And you know, don't take this as gospel. It's not something that you should hold to the highest degree. You know, it's like, this is what I think. This is what I think. You feel free to make your own informed opinions on everything. In fact, I encourage it. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. But yeah, let's get into it. So first off, let's get this out of the way. Wes is the worst character in this game. His upsides, if you could call them that, are basically non-existent. His downsides are extremely varied. I don't think I need to get into why Wes is particularly the worst character in this game. Mostly just because, you know, he's designed to be the worst character in the game. He's designed to be a challenge character. So it makes sense that, like, Clay designs their characters to be worse if they're meant to be a challenge, you know. Going on, I'm not gonna do this ordered, by the way. Like, I'm not just gonna say work my way up from D tier to S tier. I'm just gonna look at characters as they present themselves. And right now, Wanda, I think this is a pretty easy call. Wanda as a character is somebody that I am astounded over. I cannot believe that somebody looked at Wanda and said, yeah, this is fine. Because Wanda is designed to be a quote-unquote glass cannon, but she effectively has the same amount of health as Wilson, so the glass cannon aspect of it doesn't even make sense in terms of that. But you can also look at her old form, which is where really her glass cannon playstyle resides. And just due to all of her perks existing in the way that they do, such as her being able to wear knight armor with little to no downside, her having more range than every character just due to her having a whip, her having a backstep watch which just grants her iframes, you know, like, just so many things compile onto Wanda as a character to make her not really a glass cannon, as well as she just has significantly more options than the average character. If you look at her going up against someone like Klaus, for example, then because of her range, she fundamentally breaks the boss fight, because Klaus just can't get within aggro range. You can cheese Klaus so easily with Wanda. On top of that, because you have more range, you could greed for damage more. Like, her combat abilities are so good. Her survivability is also really good because she just has renewable healing. And even aside from that, she has the power to transport you from one point of the map to the end. Like, the fact that she could just drop teleporting points is so insane. Like, Wanda is absolutely one of the best characters in mid-late game, and in early game, she doesn't even suffer all that much because you could just rush magic and get her best weapon and then just be fine. I definitely think something needs to be done about Wanda. Like, maybe just let other characters use her tools, so that way, on average, every character goes up except for Wanda. But of course, like, make them slightly worse, because it would make sense that she's able to use them better than other characters. You know, I don't think it is too far beyond the scope of comprehension to say Wanda is S tier. Moving on to Weber. A little controversial. I think these two choices are definitely the easy ones. Like, people look at this start of this tier list and say, yeah, that's fine. But here's where we start getting into a little bit of a hot take with Weber being B-. I don't think that Weber's utility is all that great. A lot of people say that, like, oh, well, he has infinite healing, but so does everybody. You could cook and eat the spiders with, like, vegetables and turn some of them into eggs, and you'd get better healing than Weber does. Well, I say better healing, but you get healing from doing that. It's not character specific, which is valued amongst the entirety of the cast, not just Weber. A big appeal to him is the ability to start Spider Wars and just mass farm spiders, but you could do that with a spider hat. So overall, his utility is just kind of not great in the long run. I feel like maybe if he was able to maybe team up with characters better. Like, it's a big annoying part about Weber is you want to have spiders everywhere, but spiders are naturally hostile, and it is really easy for them to lose the little spider den decorations. Overall, I think his upsides are pretty meh. A lot of it is accomplished by getting a spider hat, and his downsides are just, for the most part, not there, because he's a monster, which means bunnies and pigs are gonna aggro onto you, but for the most part, they do it anyways, and you want them dead. So if you have a way to deal with them, then, you know, the downside is negligible. But for the early start, when you're trying to get those things, then it could be annoying. I think if he had more prospects in late game, like if he was able to, I don't know, maybe tame. I feel like everybody recommends that, like, oh, Weber should be able to tame spider queens. I think that'd be fine. If he was just able to do more with his spiders. Like, my thought process is Weber is somebody who controls a large quantity of enemies. So, if he just had more of, like, a real-time strategy aspect to him, I think he would be a way better character. But, you know, that's just what I think should be done about the character. Moving on to Wortox, huh? Another hot take. I think Wortox is bad. I think this character is one of the worst characters in this game. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but Wortox has AoE healing. He has the ability to teleport. He has iframes on his teleport. Like, it's just, that's all fine. But I feel like people overstate the value of that. And what I mean by this is, think about how hard it is to get to top yourself off with souls consistently, and how much it takes for you to do that. You're going to need bug nets in order to catch either butterflies or bees. You're going to have to keep them fed constantly if you don't want to bundle wrap them. And even if you bundle wrap them, then they're not going to stay in your inventory. No, actually they do. But even if you bundle wrap them, then it's just going to be annoying to have to cycle through that. You waste so much time gathering souls, and the times that you can use souls are pretty negligible, I feel. And the AoE healing is definitely his best one, just because healing a large quantity of people all at once is pretty nice. But at the same time, you could accomplish the same thing by having a kitchen and just making yourself a bunch of healing food. You could even just go into the caves, pick a bunch of blue mushrooms, bring them back, and have other people eat it. Like, healing is, all things considered, it isn't an issue once you sort of get the ball rolling. Like, his early game is really where he shines, but that's all he has. And for such a bad late game where he just can't eat as effectively as everybody else, which is such a bad downside because, you know, that cuts you off from healing food, sanity food. Like, it just makes all of those worse. Overall, I think Wortox is just bad. His upsides are only really valuable in certain scenarios, and most of the time you would just be better off going with the alternatives. Walter, I think Walter is a adequate character to an extent. I think he isn't great. He's not he's there. I don't think he provides as much as he should. He provides a sleeping tent, like a sleeping roll, whatever it was called, and a slingshot, which the slingshot's damage is really the big issue. Its DPS just isn't high. Its range factor is only really useful when you're dealing with, like, killing birds, I guess. Overall, his utility is kind of, it's kind of bad. Having a Chester on you at all times is fine, but why wouldn't you just have Chester? Having a worse Beefalo is like, why wouldn't you just tame a Beefalo? Having that immediately, though, is nice. So his early game is definitely something that can be admired. However, the fact that he has to get all of the resources for his slingshot means, like, you're gonna be mid-game at that point. And at mid-game, why wouldn't you just, you know, get all of the alternatives, you know? Why don't you just get a Dark Sword? Why wouldn't you just get a Beefalo? That combined with his downside of, whenever he takes damage, he loses sanity. And if he's not at full health, then he passively just drains sanity, which is really annoying if you're not trying to stay sane, or if you're not trying to stay insane. But, you know, you could just get your health back up and not a big issue. He just doesn't provide a lot. The big thing is that he just doesn't have a lot of things that is, like, nothing to write home about, you know? Wilson, I'm gonna put Wilson in B tier. Wilson is, like, basic one. He's not bad, he's not good. Actually, I would put Wilson probably in, like, bottom of B minus. Because I have a hard time saying that Weber and Walter are just worse than Wilson. But I definitely think that they're on par with one another. I don't really know what there is to say about Wilson. He grows a beard. You know, he's fine for winter, I guess. Doesn't have any downsides. Just a average character. Wormwood, I think Wormwood is B minus tier. Maybe above Wilson. I think the fact that he limits his healing to healing salves, poo, manure, jelly beans are really nice for him, but at the end of the day, having limited healing is definitely an issue. It makes for interesting gameplay for the people who appreciate it. I personally am not a big fan of Wormwood. You know, he farms a bit better than everybody else, but at the same time, he doesn't bring anything necessarily new to the table. Like, he can talk to plants while he walks over them when he's bloomed, but at the same time, you have so many things that can also do the same thing. You have shell bells and you have the friendly fruit fly. Both of those are just really nice to have, and if you do choose to farm, then, you know, that's what the bloom effect is, like, kind of negligible in the farming department. But at the same time, you gotta consider, I'm not a big fan of farming. I think farming is kind of bad because it tends to lock you down to one place, and you know, I just prefer the alternatives. So make of Wormwood's placing as you will. I think his speed boost is nice, but overall, I just don't enjoy his playstyle, so maybe I'm a little biased here. I definitely think he's better than Walter, though. Walter provides so little, whereas Wormwood, for the most part, just dumps a bunch of food on your doorstep, which is always nice, but at the same time, other characters could just do the same thing with a gardening hoe. Like, it's not like Wormwood brings anything special in terms of farming. Like, he doesn't make them grow faster, he doesn't make them yield more, he just does it more effectively, I guess. Like, he doesn't really provide anything new to the table. Like, you could do the same thing with Wormwood that you can with a character like Willow or WX. Just needs a little bit more, like a little more time. Wickerbottom, I think, is either B or B+. Like, I'm gonna get this out of the way. I don't think when Wickerbottom was ever overpowered. I think there's a big narrative in the Don't Starve community that says Wolfgang, WX, and Wickerbottom were at some point the best characters, which I just disagree with. I definitely think that Wickerbottom was stronger than average. If her books didn't get split, I would put her in like A tier, because that's just mass production of a bunch of things. But the issue is that she just doesn't really provide anything out of the ordinary, other than mass producing certain crops. Like, she could mass produce twigs, grass, and reeds, which are pretty strong, all things considered, which is why she is at B+. But at the same time, a lot of characters can just do what she does with a little bit more prep. So what I point to is a lot of people say, like, oh, well, you could make tentacle farms, which tentacle farms have their uses here and there. Overall, you're probably better off using catapults. Probably better off, like they're just a safety hazard to me. They just don't seem like it's something that you want to set up when you could do, like, anything else. You could farm with an alternative. Like, even with Bee Queen, which is what I typically see people use on tentacles for, you're better off just setting up rabbit hutches and getting rabbits to kill Bee Queen for you. Like, it's less of a danger than tentacles are. So overall, it's just not very worth it to set up tentacle farms. Sleepy Time Stories is fine. It's just a worse pan flute, which I am a lot more willing to use Sleepy Time Stories than I am a pan flute in scenarios like, oh, I just need this enemy to not attack me for a few seconds. So overall, she's fine. Wickerbottom is a fine character. She does what she does, and she does it all right. I don't think there's anything too extraordinary about it, but, you know, whatever. Willow. I'm gonna put Willow at B. I think Willow provides enough to where you wouldn't feel bad about having her on your team, but I don't think anybody would go out of their way to ask for a Willow. And the reason I say that is because Bernie is fine. On a side note, I do really like Bernie's design, like, just as an item. But Bernie can distract nightmare creatures, which isn't something that anybody else can do. Well, anybody else has the tools to do, rather. Because, you know, anyone could just draw aggro from nightmare creatures if they want. But nobody has, like, a dummy that they could just say, hey, look over there. Willow is the only one that does this, which is why I think she's somewhat better than average. Because, like, keep in mind, to me, B- is average. So, I think, yeah. Her resistance to overheating is fine in summer, but at that point, you're just going to live in the caves. A thermal stone and a, like, basically any kind of insulation kind of makes her ease of freezing, I guess. It makes how easy she can freeze a little, you know, shaves the edge off. Her lighter is fine. I think at some point, what I see a lot of players do is I see them bring rock fruit with them everywhere. And, you know, if you want to cook rock fruit, then, like, you can. It's fine. It heals a little bit more. But her lighter is kind of meh. The biggest appeal to her is probably Bernie. Because you could basically just get a mini-boss to draw aggro for you while you sit there and just deal a massive amount of damage. Like, Bernie is always nice to have. He isn't as good as other followers, I think, like Abigail, Merms. You know, well, when given a sufficient amount, like catapults, I think do their job better. Even a certain amount of pigs. But for what Bernie is, I definitely think that he is fine. Like, which is why I put her above average. WX, I think WX is... I think he is either A- or B+. I might come back to it, but my thought process is WX doesn't particularly provide anything for the team. He doesn't really provide anything for anybody, but he boosts himself up to an extent, to such a degree, where you have a really hard time of dying, and you have an easier time than most, like just running errands, going back and forth from one point of the map to the other, assuming that you're overcharged. Which, you know, you could accomplish that with telelocator staffs if you really wanted to. Or if you have a Wickerbottom on your team, then the end is nigh is obviously the best option. But WX is a character that only cares for himself. He is a very selfish character, but at the same time, he is very good at being selfish. His maximum stats can go up to like 400 HP is the one that sticks out in my mind, like a huge amount of sanity. Which makes me think that he is better than average, worse than like A tier. I think he is at a comfortable spot right here where he's at the bottom of B+. But I don't think anybody would like ask for a WX, you know? Because typically how it goes is somebody plays WX and then you, looking at that, join as Wickerbottom and then just tell him to go do something for you in exchange. I feel like I haven't talked about A tier characters, which quite a few of these characters are. So let me, one of my more controversial opinions, right? Because I see people talk about this character a lot, like he's extremely good. But, I have a hard time putting him at S tier, but Worley is definitely a strong character. The fact that he can provide a damage boost, the fact that he can provide lightning damage on command, the fact that he can provide just faster chopping and mining speed is always nice. Damage reduction is whatever. But all of this combined makes him a really strong character. He just does a lot of things that other characters simply can't do, which is always preferred. But he requires a lot of setup. He requires farming, like as in crops, which can hold him back a bit. And he requires, for his most well-known recipe, Volt Goat Schaudfreude, he requires Volt Goat horns, which are definitely worth farming, but that also requires a bit of setup. So I have a hard time imagining him breaking S tier, because I feel like S tier is like a pantheon on their own. You know, I think Wanda is definitely a character that you look at and think, oh, well, that is easily an S tier character. But Worley, he is somewhat limited on healing, which I think is what's preventing me from putting him at A+, because the fact that he loses, that he has diminishing returns on eating the same food means he can't just shovel pierogi in his face, which is typically how a lot of other characters handle healing. And the fact that he can't eat raw food means like he's gonna have to go out of his way to deal with things like sanity and things of that nature. Overall, I think A+ is a fine place for him. I have a hard time imagining him breaking S. Maybe if he had a few more recipes, maybe if other characters were able to use his crockpots, that would incentivize a little bit more team play. And then maybe I could see him in S tier, because then that would mean like Worley's a staple that you definitely want. But I have a hard time putting Worley in S tier. Which I've talked to a few Worley mains, and I feel like they've, for the most part, agreed with me. Worley is definitely a strong character, but S tier? I don't know. Let's see, who else? I think Maxwell Okay, I'm gonna knock two out right now. I think Maxwell and Woodie are on par with one another, and that's because maybe Woody's a little higher. And the reason for that is Maxwell is a character who excels at gathering resources, like, immediately. He can go in with a Shadow Digger and a Shadow Cutter and just level the forest, and you're basically set on wood. He could go into a quarry, mine a bunch of rocks. He makes farming marble a lot less of an issue than it should be. And he's just really good at what he does. Like, what he does well. And what he does well is pretty preferable for, like, mid-end game, even in early game. His downsides are he has a hard time farming nightmare fuel, which in a team isn't really an issue. When you're alone, it becomes a little bit more of an issue, but at the same time, you can just keep shoveling green caps in your face, so that's not really too big of a downside. His health is also something that you're going to have to manage, but because of his inherent 6.66 sanity increase, just passively, he doesn't really need to wear any hat other than the helmet. He doesn't need to wear tam other than for insulation. He doesn't really need to wear, well, I guess he could still wear a umbrella, but at the same time, you could do the same thing with an umbrella and a football helmet and still have the damage reduction in case you do get hit. But because of how prominent kiting is, that's not really an issue. Overall, Maxwell a pretty solid character. Woodie, you could look at him in a few ways, right? When I look at Woodie, I think I don't think that he is a resource gatherer, right? Not in the traditional sense. A lot of people compare him to Maxwell, or used to at least, because he used to just chop down trees really quickly, which Maxwell just did better. While he still has that, they also introduced Moose and Goose, which both of them are good in their own respect. Goose is insanely good for rushing things like Lunar, just because you could walk over the water. Like, you just run straight to Lunar, eat a meatball, and then loot basically the entirety of Lunar Island. You could get the rock fruit really early, you could get kelp really early, you could get anemones really early, and then just run back, and then boom, you're set. His Moose form, I think, is pretty good. Like, there's not really much of a reason that you want to be a moose in things like boss fights, which is typically where I see people say, like, oh, Wardley's not that great because you could just have a handbat. You just have, like... That's not really how I see it. How I see it is Woodie is a budget Abigail in that respect. He can just go into a spider biome and repeatedly do charges back and forth in order to do, like, a lot of AoE damage and just clear out a bunch of spiders. I think that is a bit more comparable to, in terms of combat, like, comparing him to Abigail, than it is to compare him to a character like Wolfgang or Wanda. So overall, I think Woodie's fine. He's basically a bunch of, slightly worse characters rolled into one, which puts him, like, pretty good. Like, if to me personally, if I had the choice between a Wendy and a Woodie, I would ask him to be Woodie just because he can provide a bit more. But at the same time, he is also just worse versions of those characters. So if you have those characters already, Woodie becomes obsolete, which is why he isn't in, like, any higher than A-. I think he's good. I don't think that he is great. You know, fucking Gene Withers is gonna complain to me about that. Wigfrid. I think Wigfrid is a very strong character. Whenever you join a world, right, and you ask people, like, oh, what character do I want to be? Like, what character would you like? If there isn't a Wigfrid, people want a Wigfrid. Her helmets are really good, just because they're an alternative to football helmets, which in some scenarios are preferred. When you don't have a pig farm, then, you know, that's something that you don't want, right? Like, if you have a pig farm, then you don't really want to make pig helms because you want to use that pig skin to make a pig farm. And helmets are also just double durability, which is always pretty nice. Like, just increased durability is just good. I don't think that's too crazy to say. And, like, that's what she provides to the team. For the most part, to the team, she provides helmets. But in every other aspect, she's just good overall. Her songs can also provide buffs to the team. Conserving durability on Dark Swords can cut back on resource costs, like, immensely. Healing during fights is so good. Like, whenever Wigfrid is rushing a boss, like Dragonfly or, like, Bee Queen, she just cuts down on resource costs so much. Just because she, A, can heal teams passively, just in combat. B, can provide armor. And C, if she has anything, if she's facing off against Deerclops or something, anything that has a big sanity aura, right? Anything that just drains your sanity, she can find ways to alleviate that. You know, she has Clear-Minded Condensa and the other one that's, I can't remember. But the fact that she provides so much to the team is just so nice to have. Her downside of only being able to eat meat isn't really a big hassle. Like, you could just walk around with meatballs in your pocket. She still has access to pierogi. You know, it's like, her diet isn't really an issue. You just gotta be comfortable with killing things more, which is why I say that new players should probably try out Wigfrid. Just be sure to kite. Because Wigfrid puts you in the mindset of, oh, well, this thing gives me food. I, as a character, am forced to go kill it. So I better get comfortable with having to kill that enemy. So, you know, that's what I think in terms of recommendations for starting players. I think getting over the fear of dealing with enemies is something that Wigfrid can provide. I think that her passive health and sanity bonus from dealing damages, like, kind of attests to that. Overall, Wigfrid's just a solid character. She is always nice to have on a team, and more often than not, that's why you see her on public servers. Wolfgang. Okay. Bear with me here. Bear with me here. I think Wolfgang is B tier. The reason I say this, right? Bear with me, bear with me. Well, maybe he's probably better than Willow. The reason I say this is because he specializes in combat specifically. And while combat is a factor in this game, right? You typically want to kill things like Dragonfly, you want to kill things like Bee Queen, you want to kill things like, you know, the list goes on. Like, it just makes up a small portion of late game. Because typically you set up farms in order to deal with a ton of bosses. So Wolfgang is really only insanely useful in that first cycle. After that, there are a lot of bosses that you just don't really have a reason to go fight again. Like Antlion, like, you don't really have a reason to go fight that boss unless somebody else wants the Tellocator Focus, or not Tellocator Focus, the Lazy Deserter blueprint, which I don't really know why you would. Because, you know, one person could just go throughout the world and set up lazy deserters at certain locations. He provides very little to the team. His team play is basically non-existent. He goes in, he takes your rocks, he takes your food, he works out, and then he goes kill bosses. Which, getting the boss loot is fine, but at the same time, you could do that as any character. He just kind of cuts back on resources and a bit of time. So, like, I know it's controversial to say that Wolfgang's bad. I don't think Wolfgang was ever particularly good, even prior to the rework. Like, this isn't just because of the rework. I think that he would have probably been higher because of the rework, because he had a speed boost. The fact that he had a speed boost means that he was just able to traverse the world faster, which would put him on par with WX. But now maintaining might is so tedious that a lot of the times people just don't see it as worth it. And I am definitely one of those people. I don't think it's all that worth it. Because you basically just have to go AFK for a few seconds. Like, that's and you have to do that, like, every single day if you want to get any of his uses. Like, if you want to make use of his perk, then you have to be mighty. Like, there's no in between. It's either you have perks and are mighty, or you have no perks and you're not mighty. Like, it's just it's just kind of bad. It's just like there's something that can be said, I guess, about moving statues faster, but at the same time, Walter does that better. Wanda does that better. And then carrying marble, like being able to equip marble and piggyback it's whatever. Like, here's the thing, most of the time you don't want to walk around with just a marble armor or with a piggyback on. Because even if you're making use of it and staying mighty, you're still gonna have to stay mighty throughout the entirety of carrying it. Like, the big thing that you have to consider is that how much time does it take for you to be mighty? You know what I mean? Like, how much time does it take for you to go from point A to B, to go to the gym, to work out, and how many resources did it take for you to make another gym at certain locations? And like it's just, Wolfgang just isn't great. Like, he just doesn't provide anything to the team. A lot of the times, like, his combat abilities are just blown out of proportion, in my opinion. He's just meh. Like, I'll tell you right now, if somebody joins and they say, oh, we need a combat character, what combat character do you want me to be? I'm definitely not going to say Wolfgang. Like, I'll say Wigfrid before I say Wolfgang, because she provides helmets, she provides healing. Like, Wolfgang's just kind of bad. I don't really know what to say other than that. Going on to Wendy. You see this character everywhere. A+, maybe high A, maybe A-. Wendy is a tricky character because, like, on one hand, yeah, combat is a little harder because she doesn't deal as much damage, but at the same time, she just has the ability to not deal with a ton of enemies. Hounds aren't an issue because you could just get Abigail to kill things for you. Spiders aren't an issue because you could just get Abigail to kill things for you. Spelunkies aren't really an issue because Abigail. She just gets rid of the potential threat of so many enemies while having such a minute downside. In fact, she deals more DPS when she has Abigail out to a single enemy than Wigfrid does. Like, the only thing that's really stopping her from being as strong, if not stronger than Wigfrid, is the fact that a lot of bosses have AoE. So that means Abigail is going to end up dying. But at the same time, you could just keep Abigail healthy with all your potions. And even then, you could just rush things like Bee Queen with her. Like, she is such a strong character that, and I don't think people sing her praises as much as they should. She is such a strong character for however many downsides she has. Like, it's insane. Now, she's in a similar boat with Worley, I feel. Sure, she could delete some enemies, but that hassle with bosses is a pretty, I'm not going to say significant factor, especially after rambling about how Wolfgang actually wasn't all that great. But it's definitely a factor. It's definitely something that you have to consider. And because of that, I don't think she breaks S tier. You know, once again, I feel like it should be said. All of this is my opinion. Feel free to make your own opinions. If you want to see my ideas as valid or not, then actually, yeah, just tell me in the comments what you think should have been taken into account. All that fun stuff. But these two are probably going to be my most controversial ones because a lot of people think that they're bad. Me, on the other hand, I think these are some of the best characters in the game. And the reason I say this is because, like I said in the beginning, I value endgame significantly more than I value early game. And these two characters have a lot of potential in late game. Wurt, probably the most effective person at gathering resources. her downsides of not being able to eat meat, while it's a factor, if you have a farm going, that's not an issue. And even if, like me, you don't like farming, you can just go into the caves, grab a bunch of mushrooms, roll them roll the red ones specifically into ratatouille. If you have meat, you could just feed those to a bird, make fistful of jams. Like, her diet restrictions aren't really a huge issue until you need healing, in which case you could just get blue mushrooms, and then just get a few cacti to keep your sanity up. That, combined with the fact that she can set up Merm King, is the first thing I want to talk about, which just gives her 250 health, which is, by the way, more than Wolfgang has when, like, at any point. And she has a high hunger, which means you could just pop that up and not have to worry about it for a long time. High sanity, which means pop that up, don't have to worry about it for a long time. And it makes all the merms in the world passive, which is nice, but you probably don't want to set up merms right next door to your base, even then, because, you know, they tend to wander, and if Merm King dies at a bad time, then it could be an issue. Where she really shines is her followers. Merms can be used to chop down a ton of forest, a ton of rocks, a ton of marble, and in those forests, if they come into a tree guard, they're not just going to stop production. Like, Maxwell's minions can't deal with tree guards. Worts, they'll tear that thing to pieces. They can sweep a forest faster because there are more of them, and they can deal with the consequences of it because they deal a lot of damage. Like, merms are just super good to have. They just, damn, where is a strong character? I don't think people say that enough. Like, the argument can be made that you can just get Berger to clear out a forest if you want. But Berger also dies to tree guards relatively quick with the amount of trees that he's cutting. And he's only available in 2 seasons, which is why I don't really consider him as like a, like just a consistent tool. I don't really take that as much into account as I probably should, admittedly. But overall, I think Wurt is just an insanely strong character. Like, I think she is one of, if not the best characters in the game. Especially in late game where you could just have fish in order to be better thermal stones. Like, she is a very good character. And Winona, I think everybody memes on her a lot. Everyone's like, oh, she's Miss Swap character, right? And what I'm gonna say might be a little saucy, a little controversial, but bear with me here. Which I sure hope you have been, because it's controversial. The fact that she is a swap character just makes her better. Because she can set up mass farms for basically any enemy in the game. And not even have to be there. Like, the huge thing is that if you wanted to, you could put down Winona catapults, swap a character that is better, like Wanda, and still get the benefits of the catapults. The fact that she could just automate basically everything, or just make it significantly easier at the very least, is just so good late game. It basically means that you don't have to play the game and still gets all of the benefits from it. Like, it is insane. Like, obviously, people are going to be like, oh, well, what about the cost? What about the cost of rocks? And what about the cost of gems? Which, the rock thing is a little valid, I would say. Because Winona is known for draining your rocks. Which is why, you know, I typically play Wurt and Winona. Because, you know, she has an easier time farming rocks. But if you wanted to, right, and if you were willing, you could allocate certain resources to the local Winona and just have her go off. And for the most part, you only need 1 catapult for an effective farm, so it could cut off, it could cut back on rocks. And a lot of times you just have to know what corners to cut in order to make farms as effective as it can be. So overall, Winona's costs are really high, but her benefits are also insane. It's high cost, even higher reward, if you ask me. Which is why I say that those 3 characters, because of how good they are at doing what they do, and because for the most part they provide things that no other character can really compete with to the same degree, makes me think these 3 characters are S tier. So let's take one last look at this. Is there any character that I think should be moved up or down? So due to the recent announcement of the beta and the Wolfgang changes in that beta, I've decided to move him up like about this much. I think Wolfgang, the fact that Wolfgang gets all the things that he does just out of doing work that you're probably already going to do, as well as the fact that he can maintain his mightiness form during combat just by dealing damage, which is what you're supposed to be doing in combat, makes me think that he is probably better than I gave him credit for, you know, initially. But overall, I still think that he's like on par with characters such as like Wickerbottom, WX, especially in team-based setting where like you're already putting out enough damage to really cripple a boss. And on top of that, I wanted to readjust where I put Wormwood because of how valuable farming has become to the people that I play with. And what I mean by that is I'm not somebody who farms a lot. However, having the crops around is definitely more useful than I give it credit for. But I think that that has its limit, and Wormwood's a character that like caps that limit pretty easily. And once that is over with, I don't think he's that useful. And like for the most part, I think he's just replaceable. You know, I don't really see much of a use for him, but he's definitely better than I gave him credit for. So I'm gonna revise his placement on the tier list a little. So you know, this tier list that I'm gonna pull up is probably the one I'm gonna be referring to from now on. But a lot of it is for the same reasons that I just kind of either undervalued or overvalued certain aspects of them. Willow's utility has also kind of been brought to my attention because she can't really do too much out of the ordinary, but the fact that she has that one thing really is what sells her. And I think that as it currently is, I'm fine with where she is on the tier list. But you know, it's just overall opinions change over time. You know, it's natural for that to happen. So you know, if you agree with some parts of my tier list and then like find out later and then talk about that. I think this is a comfortable enough tier list. I definitely think about this a lot, and I definitely talk about it a lot. But, you know, as a result, a lot of my opinions over time have changed. A lot of other ones have, like, you know, been more solidified over time. But, yeah, I think this is a fine tier list for what I think the best characters are. Now, obviously, this tier list is going to be very different from other people, but maybe that's because they value things differently, or maybe because they don't see the game the same way I do, which is fine. I definitely don't think that people should take what I say here as gospel. You know, I'm just some guy. This is my opinion of the characters in this game. And, you know, don't be toxic about it. Don't be an asshole. If you agree, then that's fine, but at least know why you're agreeing. Don't just go out and say, yeah, these characters are the best because that guy said so. And definitely don't tell people to choose characters based off of this tier list, because you got to keep in mind, people are comfortable with the characters that they're comfortable with. Like, even if the character isn't what I would classify as good, if they could do a good job of playing them, then, you know, whatever. Like, they contribute to the team enough, they do their job, like, that's fine. It's fine by all measures and standards. So just don't be an asshole about it. But that's about it. Let me know what you guys think about my placings. If you guys disagree or anything, then let me know, because I definitely do enjoy talking about what I think of this game and like what, especially the characters. I think the characters are all designed in a pretty cool and unique way. Obviously, there's some things that I'll tweak here and there, but you know, just let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you alls later. Bye-bye.